listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. This is the show that talks about identity and access management and making sure you know who has access to what. Let's get started. Welcome to the Identity at the Center podcast. I'm Jeff, and that's Jim. Hey, Jim.
Hey, Jeff. How are you?
Oh, not so bad. Yourself?
I'm doing great.
Yeah, we're off to a great start. I'm going to interject right here real quick because I saw your son come in the door behind you.
I know,
we're on camera. We don't typically do video, right, for the podcast, but we do use it for visual signals and things like that. I thought that was hilarious.
Yeah, and we've been on. The other thing is we've been talking for like the last hour and a half, and two things. One is that just happened. He just walked in, right. Didn't walk in for the last hour and a half. The
Right.
second thing is, it's like the conversation always flows so naturally when you hit record. It's showtime, folks.
And that's when everything goes bad, right? Yeah, the internet connection drops, or some banging noise that you just can't control. The landscapers show up, the heater starts, whatever it may be. That's just the way it is. But
It's guaranteed.
yeah. So we've actually been catching up quite a bit here for the last about an hour now, hour and a half roughly. Yeah, just kind of sitting here talking. Why is that, Jim? Why are we catching up like that?
Well, I just saw that we have a new logo. So I think it was an hour and a half chat about this new logo. What do you think?
Yeah, so I did some cosmetic updates to our branding, Identity at the Center. Have a new logo. I think I pushed that out. Let's see, this would be last week, so kind of the week of April 4th, I think it was, or something like that. Or maybe it was April 11th, I don't remember. But recent. And some spring is in the air, so making some changes, doing some house cleaning, things like that. I think we've got new logos that I've been working on. I'm not much of an artist, but I'm kind of pleased with the way that this one turned out. So we'll see how it sticks.
I noticed that it no longer says powered by Protivity.
Yeah, it doesn't. So I am no longer with Protivity. I have moved on to an exciting new opportunity that I'm sure we'll talk about in the future more. But yeah, I'm with a company called RSM now. And if you're like, who? Absolutely get you. It's the same thing. But a large tax audit and risk consulting firm. And I've got an exciting opportunity that I'll be building up an identity and access management practice and running and leading that, which is kind of an upgrade for me from a career standpoint. So I'm excited about that. So we're no longer working together day in, day out like we have been for the last, 7 years or 8 years or however long it's been.
Yeah, it's been just about that. And but I think this kind of gets to the spirit of this podcast, because if you're one of our listeners for a long time and you actually never noticed from the logo that is powered by Protivity, you probably didn't know it was powered by Protivity. And it was like whenever we would bring a guest on, we would say to the guest, this is not an infomercial, right? It's not an opportunity to plug your company. We don't plug our company. So we never talked about the services that we offered, whether when we were with Identropy or Protivity. Jeff's not planning to plug RSM services, right? This is,
right.
We call it a safe place. It's not an infomercial.
Safe place. Yep, vendor neutral. Technically, we are competitors now, but we are still friends and we are still talking identity. I think the first question that came out of every single person when I said, yeah, I'm going to be making this change was, are you going to keep doing the podcast? Like, yeah, that's the plan, is we're going to keep doing it. We like doing it. It's something that we've always done. Even before Protivity was with Identropy, like you said, that's where we actually started. But the way I've typically described it is like we do this as kind of like pirate radio to some degree. This is not our day job, and we do it for the love of the game, and that's what we do. So regardless of our current statuses, I think the plan is we'll keep things going. Yeah, we'll have a new logo, of course. Probably keep that one for a little while and see how that goes. But change is good, and it's good to kind of keep things fresh, and keep things moving forward. But we'll try to keep things as vendor neutral as we've always tried to. Like you said, Jim, that's like one of the things that we try to do is when we have people on is yeah, let's not turn this into a 45-minute infomercial for product X. That's not what I want to listen to myself. So hopefully we're not imposing that on people who are listening to to our episodes week in, week out.
Yeah, I don't think anybody wants to listen to that. I was just having a thought that so many of our guests, when we do our prep session, so we do a prep session each time we record with the guests, just to let them know, like, here's the format for the podcast and how we interact, what to expect, et cetera, et cetera. How often do we hear, oh, yeah, I was thinking about starting a podcast myself? And it's
Mm-hmm.
great. But I think that folks don't realize how much work goes into doing a podcast, especially on a regular basis. And, of the folks that have told us that, Vittorio Bertucci, I always see he just put out a LinkedIn post. He's on his 4th season. And I listen to his podcast sometimes. I
Mm-hmm.
mean,
Identity
what
Unlocked by
Identity Unlocked.
Auth0. Yep.
Fantastic podcast. Definitely more technical, right? He's coming at it from a perspective of here are emerging standards or changes to the standards. So he's kind of got like a DevOps, more technical perspective of the IAM space than you and I have. We come at it more from the standpoint of program management. I mean,
The
being a good
business side of it. Yeah.
the practitioner side, and I think that we have a lot of technical guests. We talk about technology. IM is very technology based, very business based as well, but it's about awareness. So that's what we try to bring with the podcast on a regular basis, is awareness of what's going on. That's one of the main topics that I wanted to bring up today, is kind of an awareness thing. So you want to kind of transition us into that, or
Yeah, let's make the awkward transition. You brought up this topic of privilege access management is changing. What the hell do you mean?
yeah. Well, rather than just saying privilege access management is dead, because sometimes if you have that clickbait shock title, then
Yeah.
more people tune in. But it's not that it's dead. It's just what's happening. And I see this with my clients over and over again.
Wait. Before you get into that, I gotta think about here, like how we're gonna name this name this episode. Like, what's clickbaity for this? Is like 10 ways Pam saved your life or something like that.
Yeah,
Right.
it's
That's
got
what
to
we
be
need
a
to come up.
certain number.
Yeah, when we're having this conversation, let's try to think of like a good clickbaity title, and then folks who listen will know where the title came from.
3 reasons Pam is dead. No, that's really not what I'm trying to communicate, that Pam is dead. I think Pam in some ways is more alive than ever, but the use cases are changing. And where I'm coming at from that is I'm working with clients, maybe a dozen to 15 a year, which is a small sample size, but I think it's somewhat representative. And you see the major trends that are happening in IT. And the biggest trend that almost every client is going through is the major shift toward cloud infrastructure, AWS, Google Cloud, Microsoft Azure. I've been working with a lot of clients recently that are doing that shift to AWS, and they're doing less and less with their traditional on-prem data centers. Now, that doesn't mean they don't have on-prem data centers. Some of them don't, especially if they're companies that were kind of, came into creation within the past decade. It's like they never took the time to stand up traditional data centers. Why would they? They could have just gone right to AWS. But the more that you have at AWS, you've got a tendency, especially if you're building applications, consumer facing applications, where you're building those yourselves and you're using automation to deploy those. So essentially, that DevOps use case, you've got a greater and greater reliance on machine identities, the people who operate in those environments. I think it was Brian Deitch from Zscaler who said to us, like, all identities at AWS are privileged accounts. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it's like the predominance of your privileged access use cases become the machine identities and the human identities at AWS. And I think a lot of the traditional PAM solutions were built around, all right, that AWS environment doesn't exist. We've got a bunch of servers or even VMs that run in a data center that we control. We've got service accounts. We've got maybe some application accounts, or those Unix servers are bridging to our Active Directory, and like that's our control plane. And so my perspective is that, it's almost like, how do I look at a scenario like that and start with, all right, you need a traditional privilege access management solution. If that privilege access management solution gives me a solution for my AWS environment as well, then it's a fit. But that machine identity landscape also is just, it's interesting because I'm learning more and more about it myself, right? I don't come from a DevOps background, and I know we've had a guest on the show talk DevOps, and I think if you're listening to this and you're like, oh, I've got so much to add to the conversation, reach out, because I think you'd make a great guest for our show. But what I'm learning more and more about these DevOps tools is that they just go out and get the account with the roles that they need. They use declarative, coding language to say, I need this account with these roles. They're preordained to go ahead and fetch those. And so rather than, the human IAM value chain, which is the person starts in an authoritative source like an HR system, moves into an IGA system, is granted a bunch of rights and provisioned out, makes the cycle back. I've got some application, some robot that is creating identities, not for people, but for its own purposes. And so I have coders who take that robot, tell it what to do, and then how do I trust, as an IAM program manager, how do I have the visibility to make sure that that's all within control? That's all controlled, and that, accounts aren't being created that I don't know about, or accounts aren't being created in an out of control fashion, over provision, things like that. And so I think you need a framework for all of that. I think that you need to block accounts that are obviously over provisioned accounts. I think you need to know all of your sources that are creating accounts. I think that then you need to have, some review of accounts that exist to make sure they're not over provisioned, doing some kind of analysis like, hey, these roles are actually, doing what they're supposed to be doing, and that, they're not just kind of sitting there not being used. And then the third piece to that is, again, so first piece is blocking obviously extreme bad practice or too wide of permission accounts. The second thing is doing kind of periodic scans of entitlements. And then the third thing is working with your architecture review board, so people who have oversight over this DevOps environment, to make sure that, changes to the environment that impact IAM are being addressed. So, and I could kind of foresee an example where the IAM team becomes a center of excellence. Because here, ultimately, I think the issue is like, IAM on the enterprise side creates a kind of a bureaucratic structure for getting access. But that's okay. That's really what needs to happen, because things aren't, the provisioning process of accounts, it doesn't have to happen at the speed of light. Whereas the provisioning of accounts in that DevOps environment does have to happen at the speed of light. You need to have agility in that DevOps environment, and IAM has to provide controls, but you don't want to create bureaucracy.
Well, I think that's the challenge, right? Is historically, privilege access management is red tape in front of a developer or an engineer somewhere I've got to go into this vault and I've got to like check out this password and it's slow and blah, blah, blah. Or I have to, get into session management and the performance stinks because bandwidth isn't what it should be, right? For those types of scenarios, stuff like that. So now what we're really witnessing is the evolution of where the compute is done, right? It started on-prem, now it's going to the cloud. Even and the bridge to get there has been now the DevOps side of things, where you've got infrastructure as code, and you might have these scenarios where a lot of these identities are very ephemeral, right? If you're thinking about how quickly can a machine process a transaction of requesting an account, doing its thing with the account, and then releasing the account like any other process, it could take milliseconds. How do you even detect stuff like that, where if you don't have any control over the machine that is granting those, or retrieving those permissions, how would you even know if like there was some sort of bot or something like that that was creating accounts willy-nilly and creating all these backdoors for you, very much like a Trojan or some other ransomware utility or whatever it might be, that they're exploiting all these holes without the proper privilege access management in place. And then historically, you've got, what I'll call legacy privilege access management, which is your on-prem environment. It's okay. Yeah, we have, a Windows server somewhere or an Exchange or a SQL or whatever whatever it may be. And you're trying to take the same set of capabilities that worked okay at best for on-prem. And now you're trying to do the same thing in the cloud. And oh, by the way, you're up against, computers with millisecond reaction times and running in, RAM versus on a hard drive where you've got, time and memory exploits and things like that. It's a totally different set of, it's not a different set of use cases, I should say. It's got to be a lot faster. It's got to be a lot easier. And it's got to be part of the planning and the design of how are you going to secure those privileges. You can't just say, okay, well, we're just going to put a password vault in place. Okay, I guess that's fine, right, as a basic kind of stopgap on-prem, but what happens when you've got DevOps and you've got containers being, rebuilt and constructed or deconstructed in a matter of milliseconds because you've got dynamic scaling? Where's your audit trail to show that? And how are you making sure that the script or the program that's running that is authorized to do that?
Yeah.
It's hard to do. And there was a report that came out, I think it was earlier this week on CSO Online. Palo Alto has this group called Unit 42 that did some scanning against online identities, and they found this is a buzzworthy title for you: 99% of cloud identities are overly permissive. I mean, that's a ridiculous number. That's basically you're saying is like every single cloud identity out there is misconfigured and has too many permissions. That's what that's telling me. 99% is close enough. I mean, that's huge.
What would you expect that non-cloud identities, what percentage of those do you think are over permissive?
Are we talking non-cloud like admin accounts or just all non-cloud identities?
All now non-cloud identities, because I wonder when they come up with that 99%, what they really mean. I mean, because if you look at a least privilege standpoint, it should be, if you look at a very black and white definition, is you should not be able to do anything that you don't need to do.
Well, that's the least privilege, right? I think. So here's what the article says. Unit 42 researchers analyzed more than 680,000 identities across 18,000 cloud accounts and over 200 different organizations to understand their configurations and usage patterns. It revealed that 99% of the cloud users, roles, services, and resources granted, and in quotation marks, excessive permissions that were left unused for 60 days. So there you go. Now you've got doors that are, basically waiting to be exploited. I don't, I would imagine that the level of excessive permission probably varies quite a bit, right? It's like, okay, well, here's an account that look at the corporate, cafeteria menu that we always talk about. Okay, yes. Is it technically over permissioned? Yes. Is it risky? Only if you really want to see how poorly your workforce eats, maybe. or what kind of crappy menu you serve. So there's probably levels of risk associated with that, but that's still that's a pretty decent sample size if you're looking at 680,000 identities. I mean, it's not in the grand scheme we're probably thinking billions or maybe even trillions in the identity world, but it's clear that there is work to be done to get to that least privilege concept. Or I think when we were talking with John Morden from Britiv, the zero standing privileges concept, which I'm growing more and more inclined to say, okay, well, we can't even get least privilege right. Let's just take away everything and make everything ephemeral and have it run through gates and checks as long as it's appropriately approved or has the proper authorizations behind it, those sorts of things. But that's what they've found. And oftentimes we hear things like, okay, why was the company compromised or leaked? It was like, oh, there was a misconfigured S3 bucket. There's still that as well, but most breaches are due to identity misconfiguration of some sort. In this case, over permissioning is what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think that what compounds the issue is the robot aspect, is that code is now creating the identities, checking out the identities for purposes it needs. I think ultimately what the IAM practitioner needs to do to get their arms around this is they need to provide the controls without slowing down operations. Now, I say that with hesitance because if operations are completely out of control, then you may need to slow things down. If there's not an architect who's overseeing things, it's just developers running wild, like that those videos, Girls Gone Wild, like developers gone wild.
Bots gone wild.
Bots gone wild. If that's your situation, that's really scary. You got to assume that there's some kind of architect who's overseeing things and making sure that things are staying within control. But I think there also need to be those different layers where you're scanning code, seeing if there are changes. You are then also kind of like analyzing the accounts that are actually created. But I don't think you want to. Well, first off, you brought up a great point about the password vault. So primarily password vaults are going to be, for the purposes of human identities, for people to check out a password to go log in. Obviously, a robot's not going to do that. But you can have some kind of secrets management solution so that you have some kind of central audit point, a central logging point for the authentication.
Yeah, I think the challenge there is the speed and where are you going to pull that data from and keep it up to date and secure. When would you know a bot used it wrong or code used it wrong? A human's got to look at it unless you build a bot that checks the bot.
Right.
And by then it might be too late, right? I think, is this where heuristics come in? I don't know, right? I'm just kind of thinking out loud here, but I think this is kind of that field of AI and machine learning to say, okay, well, here's what's normal behavior. I think traditionally we've talked about it being applied to human behavior, but probably easier to apply it to bot behavior because bots typically say, okay, well, this program does this and it only does this. If it does something else, that's a red flag. Either it's achieved awareness, which God help us all, or is being misused in somehow. So maybe there's an opportunity there to leverage that buzzworthy, AI machine learning that seems like every vendor is looking to put into their product. But the speed of it is the hard part, I think. How would you even detect when something nefarious went wrong? Because we see it all the time, right? In these reports where it's like, okay, yeah, the average time to detect a breach was 180 days or 60 days or whatever it is. If you're not catching it immediately, damage is done. Like it's too late. It's like an audit. It's like an access review. If you're catching things on an access review that people have the wrong permissions, sorry, man, too late. If something bad was going to happen, it would have already happened by then. It's checkbox compliance to some degree just to make sure you've got hygiene in place. But the door was open. Who came in?
I think that's one perspective, but it also, by having that perspective, you say, okay, well then doing the access reviews really doesn't have value. Why even do it? And I think there is value in it because, well,
I do too. I'll make it clear before you jump on me. Yes, I do think there's a value for it, but I think I think people understand what the value actually is compared to what it might be sold as or marketed as. That's what my challenge is.
well, you brought up one of my the things that has been playing it on my mind for a couple years now, which is we always talked about IAM as the management of who has access to what. To me, the space has kind of grown into who has access to what and what are they doing with it. Because if you don't have that second part and people are abusing the access that they have, then you have just as big of a problem, if not more of a problem. And it's to that point where, you know, okay, we've been breached and we don't find out about it for 6 months, or we've been breached. Now we know about it and we don't have the forensic capability to figure out what was accessed, how much damage was done. So I think that having that good logging architecture and then being able to make sense of those logs is absolutely critical. And I
Oh,
think
I
that
agree. But not
falls
all,
with
but not just the logging architecture. It needs to be separate from the other things that are running. Like if you've got the same team that's running IAM as running your logs, or the log, there is not like this. I don't want to use the word segregation duties, but to some degree, right? Some level of separation. It needs to be separate enough where it's would be much harder to breach one system and affect the logs somewhere else.
absolutely. They've got to be, what do they call that? Like immutable.
Yeah. Something that can't, hey, the blockchain. There we go. We just solved it for everybody. Put all your logs on blockchain and everything's good.
Yeah. Make them into Bitcoin.
Yeah, there
And
we go.
even if you get breached, at least you can retire on Bitcoin.
Right.
Yeah, but what was the other point that you brought up?
I'm sure it was very good point I brought up.
Yeah, this is the real pirate radio.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, while you're thinking of that, I know we're probably going to keep this one a little bit short today, but I wanted to ask you, this is a total topic change, is did you get a chance to watch any of the Identity Management Day stuff earlier this week that was hosted by the Identity Defined Security Alliance?
I planning on catching up on it this weekend. How about you?
I did. I was actually logged in. I was in meetings, so it was kind of tough to like do both at the same time. So I was like, when I wasn't actively in a meeting, kind of had it up on a monitor, was kind of catching it. I caught our friend Jamie from our past lives on the train as I was kind of heading my way downtown, and listened and watched to her panel with Eve Mailer and Richard Bird, and I forget the other individual. That was by far, I thought, the best one. It was what's missing in identity was the topic. So folks are, looking for kind of a thought-provoking conversation. I think that was good. Jamie's a friend of ours, so I'll dump on her for a little bit because her microphone sucked. And apparently, it's like everything else. Like we talked about that at the beginning of the show, was like, oh, okay, everything works fine, and then as soon as you hit record, that's when everything breaks. And I guess the same thing happened to her. So I chatted with her after the broadcast was done. But
What was the point that she made in terms of what was missing from identity?
There were a few different good ones. Usability, I think the ease of use was one that came up. I'm trying to remember. It was kind of a whirlwind conversation, to be honest with you. I won't be able to do it justice, so definitely go check it out. I mean, it's such a good group, right? All really good speakers, and it was a very open conversation. Like, okay, here's how are we going to fix this to make this better going forward? I think I even dropped a question into the chat, or kind of wanting their thoughts. Was my thought is like usability still isn't there. I don't think identity is easy enough for the majority of people to have the adequate security protections, meaning MFA or passwordless or some other thing that really helps them protect it. I think a lot of people still, it's too hard to change a password, or too hard to come up with a password that is meeting, security requirements, things like that. Like it's not easy enough for most people to really take this seriously. That's my soapbox for that one.
Well, definitely we'll look to check that one out. I did remember what I wanted, what you brought up.
Oh, good. Then it worked. I bought time. So there we go.
You bought some time.
Yeah.
And no, I think it's actually something we use to put a bow on all this, which is you brought up something great about the segregation of duties. And I think what this comes down to is what is the role of an IAM program when it comes to managing the security? The developers need to go and create these machine accounts, not just developers, but DevOps engineers. There's many sources for the need for these identities. The CI/CD pipeline, it's the folks who are using things like Terraform to build infrastructure on the fly. It's Docker, it's operating
Help desk,
systems,
building a chat bot to help with triaging support. It's everywhere. You
GitHub,
need to have this as a service that's available, and you need to account for it.
right? But does the IAM program need to set up the tools and run them? I think the answer is not necessarily. I think what the IAM program needs to do is provide a framework, provide controls, ensure that all the important security checkboxes are being checked. It's auditable, that it's, there are appropriate controls that account for the risk of what's happening. And that's where I think when you have a PAM solution, I think the traditional PAM focus was we're going to manage the admin accounts and maybe the machine accounts within our four walls. And I think it falls short of what's needed in this new world, which is cloud infrastructure and high levels of automation. Now, I'm not saying that vendor products fall short. And if somebody out there is sitting there like, pounding their desk saying, we solved this. This is solved. Well, let us know and get you on a future episode. But I'm not talking about just from a product perspective. I'm thinking about it from a philosophical perspective. Privilege access, when it comes to, IAM's role in managing privilege access, is much more than the traditional enterprise. It's really about the cloud. It's about DevOps and getting your arms around that and doing so in an appropriate way.
Yeah. What is your definition of privilege access to? We talk, most of this conversation focus on on-prem and kind of the cloud, but is social media, is that a privilege access? I would argue yes. We've had this conversation before, but I'll bring it up again. Like if somebody takes control of your company's Facebook account or LinkedIn account and posts stuff that you really don't want on there, that seems to me pretty sensitive, right? Pretty privileged. I don't see a lot of very good privilege access management tools around social media. I would love to talk with somebody if they're out there listening, or if you're a listener and you've got some experience with that, point us in the right direction. Reach out to us on LinkedIn. But I do see that as a gap in most identity and access management programs from a design, strategy, capability perspective. Is what are you doing about your social media accounts? Usually it's like, yeah, we provide some guidance, but we let the marketing team kind of handle that. And that's not a battle maybe that they're prepared to fight.
If you ask yourself the question, if this was breached, would it come back to me? Would someone say, well, why didn't you get your arms around this? Answer that question, or answer the question, should it be? It's similar to, I run into this one a lot where when we're in a consulting engagement, we talk about disaster recovery plans, incident response plans. This was, what does that have to do with IAM? Okay, well, if there's a disaster, you're going to be calling the IAM team to either one, help fix the disaster, or, what if the disaster has to do with the IAM system? So there is the correlation, but also from an incident response standpoint, same thing. Are you prepared to deal with an incident? And usually the core of like these cyber attacks, it tails right back to a compromised credential, and you're going to have to be able to do the forensics to help figure out what happened.
You got to think of everything. I think that's what we're trying to say, right? Is like,
Yeah.
fight every battle. This is a Littlefinger, right? From Game of Thrones. Fight every battle everywhere all the time, and you'll never be surprised. That's all. That's all you have to do. That's it.
Yeah. You just have to keep your mind going.
Yep. All right. Should we wrap things up?
Definitely.
Well, do we want to end on a lighter note?
Oh, of course. Wouldn't be the
course.
Identity at the Center podcast if we didn't.
Yeah. let's get stupid with it. What's your favorite McDonald's order,
All right. Well,
Mr. Squeaky Chair?
yeah, when you brought this up, I mean, the first thought that I had was I gotta have a chocolate milkshake if it's
For
like,
McDonald's?
oh yeah. I mean, they don't have the best chocolate milkshakes in the world, but I
Okay.
mean, you didn't mention like, hey, where would you, you didn't give me options for different fast food places. So I have to have a
Well, I
chocolate
just think
shake.
it's weird that you're bringing up chocolate shake as like the first thing for McDonald's.
That's what came
That surprises me.
it's the first thing that came to mind. And then the
Okay.
salty French fries. The
Of course,
salty French fries.
Absolutely what I thought you were going to say. Yeah.
The salty fries with the chocolate shake. And then I'm kind of a quarter pounder guy or a double quarter pounder.
Mm. Go on, I'm listening.
I like a lot of ketchup and I like extra pickles, but I rarely order that because I'm not a special order kind of person. So I just get the double quarter pounder, large fries, chocolate shake. That's if I'm like going junk food wise. You see,
Yeah.
I'm not much of a junk food guy, so but if I'm gonna go to a McDonald's drive-thru, I've already made the decision. I'm going junk food. How about you?
Treat yourself. Treat yourself.
Treat yourself.
Yeah. I'm pretty close to that. I'll go quarter pounder, maybe double quarter pounder if I'm especially hungry. Fries, but I like my burgers plain or with bacon. I don't like mustard. I don't like ketchup. I hate pickles.
Onions?
So I will absolutely special order. I can do onions, maybe I'll treat myself to some onions sometimes. Yes. But yeah, I do. I like the quarter pounder. And then, yeah, of course the fries, right? And then what I like are the frozen drinks. So like a frozen Coke or a frozen cherry or stuff like that. I am not a McDonald's. First of all, the shake machine never works anyway. So, you've got that, which is a running joke anyway in the McDonald's, ecosystem. But yeah, the Reddit or Imager or whatever it may be, the shake machine. There was a company that like built some software or some tool to help franchise owners fix their broken ice cream machines. And I guess I'm not sure who sued them, but somebody sued them to stop them from doing that. It was like the manufacturer or something of the ice cream machine said, no, you don't build a tool that will help you fix our machines, which is like totally stupid, but whatever.
If you pull up to a McDonald's at 10 o'clock and they close at 11 and you order ice cream, forget about it. I always assumed it was the people that work there just said it was broken and it wasn't really broken.
Yeah. I mean, it's, I
and
don't.
Look, when you unplug the machine, it breaks.
Yeah.
When you plug it back in, it fixes.
What are you going to do? Climb out of your car and into the window? I mean, some people will, obviously. You see them on the internet, but
yeah.
Okay, well, I guess that's my first world problem of the day is I can't get my delicious ice cream. I say ice cream because I don't even know if it's real ice cream, but my delicious, treat from that. I guess I'll have to settle for the other delicious things that I'll eat.
It's a first world problem until it happens to you.
Yeah, and then it ruins your entire day. And it's like, oh, my fries are cold. Or, yeah. Is there anything worse than getting bad French fries from McDonald's? Like, they've been sitting or they're, soggy or whatever it may be. I mean,
that's a crime against humanity.
It is. It's a total wrecker of a day for sure. All right, we got stupid with it. No,
we got to go one more.
One more. Okay, go ahead.
Taco Bell. What's your order there?
I like Taco Bell. I know it's a shame to say, but I do enjoy it. Let's see. Nacho Bel Grande, no sour cream. Crunch Wrap with no sour cream. Or you can just do basic tacos. I'm good with any of those.
Chalupas.
I've never had a chalupa.
Oh, game changer, man.
What is a chalupa?
So it's like a flatbread that they fry, but it's somehow sweet. So they must put like powdered sugar in it somehow.
With taco meat?
Or I always get the grilled chicken supreme.
Okay. So I think that's that combination of sweet. Yeah, that's not something that I'm expecting from a Taco Bell.
It's wonderful.
I want salt, cheese, and more salt.
Yeah, but what do you drink? You get something like a Mountain Dew or something, right?
I'll get like they've started doing the frozen drinks too. I love it. It used to be you could only get like an icy or something like that from 7-Eleven. Now everybody has frozen drinks, so I'll get like a frozen something or other, lemonade or whatever it is they have.
Yeah, no, they have good frozen drinks there, and yeah, grilled chicken chalupas. And because it's grilled chicken, it's healthy.
It's healthy. Yeah, exactly. You're eating lean.
Yes.
All right, let's wrap it up for this week. Any final thoughts? Is privilege access management dead? Is that how we let off with things? Is that the title? Should we put that in, and then we'll see if people are paying attention or not?
Yeah, see if we get any clickbait.
Okay, I'm gonna type that in, and we'll make that the title. All right. Well, it was good catching up with you. I'm sure we'll talk again next week at some point and get another one of these fine episodes out the door. With that, thank you all for listening. Don't forget to check us out online, identityatthecenter.com. We're on Twitter at IDAC Podcast. I did put a tweet out this week, by the way, that we wouldn't have a live stream because we were too busy putting together an offer to buy Twitter. So, just didn't happen this week. So we got to get back on the live stream. You can find those at idac.live. That's on YouTube. That's been a little bit tougher for us to be more consistent with, just because, again, this isn't our day job. So we're kind of like weaving these in when we can. And I don't know about you, but I'm starting to travel a little bit more with this new role I have. So that'll probably throw some wrinkles into things. But there are replays there that you can check out all of our fine identity shenanigans with. How about that? We'll just leave it at that. All right. Thanks, everybody, for listening. And we'll talk with everyone in the next one. Thanks for listening to the Identity at the Center podcast. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe and visit us on the web at identityatthecenter.com.